I still remember the way her skin looked, pale, waxy, almost translucent, like melted candle wax spread too thin. She was sitting in the corner of the holding room, knees curled to her chest, eyelids fluttering in slow drugged intervals. We weren't allowed to talk to them, but she looked up at me, just once, with those drained eyes, and smiled. That smile still keeps me awake. They told us this wasn't a prison. Not exactly. They said it was a preservation program, a necessary adaptation to modern life. Symbiosis, they called it. I called it a farm. It took me months to understand what I was really looking at. The facility was buried 30 feet underground beneath a decommissioned grain silo in rural Vermont. From the outside, it looked like any abandoned government site. Faded signage, rusted fencing, padlocks covered in soot and vine. But once you descended the steel staircase and passed through the triple reinforced security doors, the air turned colder, thicker. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the silence that got to you, the kind that pressed against your eardrums like a held breath. The lighting was always dim and sterile, a perpetual twilight of flickering fluorescence that buzzed just a second too long after you passed beneath them. The walls were concrete, unpainted, and the corridors were maze-like, deliberately confusing, I suspect, in case a specimen ever tried to escape. I signed up as a behavioral technician. It was one of those hush-hush private contracts that came with triple hazard pay and zero background checks. I was told I'd be working with unusual patients in a controlled environment. I didn't ask questions. The money was too good. At first, my job seemed straightforward. Monitor and log human subjects kept in secured rooms, track their vitals, note any changes in demeanor. They were always sedated, kept at a low functioning level of awareness, just enough to stand and eat when prompted, just enough to keep the blood viable. They weren't restrained. That was the disturbing part. They didn't need to be. I met Dr. Vern once, the lead hematologist. He had this way of speaking that made every word sound like a secret. The protocols evolved. He told me during my first week. Back in the early days, extraction was too aggressive, burned through the stock too fast. Now we use a drip model, less waste, more sustainability. It's about equilibrium. I remember nodding like I understood. But I didn't, not really. Not until I saw the bloodlines. Each subject had a port installed, just beneath the collarbone, a soft, semi-permanent access point that connected to a central feed system. The tubes ran along the ceilings like overgrown roots, pulsing faintly with slow-moving crimson. It was like a circulatory system stretched across concrete. The blood didn't go to storage. It went somewhere else, deep in the lower levels, where the personnel badges didn't work and the security footage never played back properly. No one talked about the lower levels. They called it the hollowing, quietly, almost reverently. It was the term used when a subject became too detached, too far gone to be of use anymore. It happened gradually. First, they stopped responding to environmental stimuli. Then they stopped eating, then blinking. Eventually, they'd just sit, eyes open, mouth slightly ajar. Not dead, not alive, just empty. They were removed then, not terminated, just taken away. I asked where they went once. One of the night nurses, Carla, just shook her head. They still give, she said, even after the mind's gone. It's the soul they need, the part that wants to live. Once that's gone, well, they become flavorless. The vampires weren't what I expected. They didn't have fangs or capes or any of the theatrics pop culture promised. They looked like us. Pale, yes, and always clad in black or grey layers like they were constantly cold. But they moved differently, too carefully, like they were always coiled under their skin. And they never made direct eye contact, as though seeing you fully might undo something inside them. They only came during harvest hours, between 3 and 5 a.m. That's when the facility went into lockdown and the security feed scrambled for privacy compliance. We were told to stay in our bunkers, not to ask questions. I didn't listen. It was Carla who gave me a key to the unused observation deck above room 42. "If you want to know why they really need us, watch during harvest," she whispered one night. "But don't move. Don't make a sound. If they know you're watching, they'll come for you too." I laughed. She didn't. That night I climbed into the observation deck. Nothing more than a dark glass alcove above the room, invisible from below. I brought no flashlight, no notepad, just waited. At 3:06 a.m., the lights in room 42 flickered and dimmed to red. The subject inside, an older man, with sunken cheeks and a trembling hand, jerked upright, as if suddenly aware of his own body. He groaned softly, confused, a child waking from a nightmare. And then they entered. 3 of them gliding through the door, as if the walls themselves opened for them. Their bodies shimmered slightly, like a mirage. They didn't speak, didn't need to. One leaned forward and inhaled deeply, savoring the air. Another crouched beside the man, placing a hand on his chest. And the third, taller than the others, lowered his face to the bloodline port and bit. He didn't tear, didn't gnash. He simply placed his mouth over it, and the line pulsed faster. The man cried out once, then began to sob softly. The sound echoed upward, thin and hollow. And then, it happened. As the vampire drank, the man's posture sagged, not just from pain, but as though something intangible was being drained from him. His expression shifted wildly, from fear to nostalgia, to despair, to calm, like memories were being unraveled and tasted midstream. His eyes fluttered, then focused, then dulled. The vampire pulled away, mouth clean, eyes closed. He whispered something I couldn't hear. The room grew impossibly still. And then the man smiled, just like the girl had. After that, I started seeing them differently. The subjects, the livestock, they weren't being trained for blood. That was just the medium. The real hunger was for the self, for memory, identity, essence. The vampires didn't just feed on blood. They fed on everything that made you human, piece by piece, slowly enough to keep you breathing, long enough to keep you producing more. And once you were hollowed, you became nothing, a vessel, a flavorless husk. But here's the thing. Some of them smiled when it happened, as though, in that final moment, they felt something beautiful, as if being consumed gave them clarity, a twisted kind of peace. I tried to leave the facility after that, handed in my resignation, packed my things, told myself I was done. But no one leaves the farm. Not really. Security intercepted me at the gates. Dr. Vern's voice came over the intercom. "You've seen too much," he said calmly. "But you could be useful. You have a strong will, strong flavor. We could give you the choice." The choice, serve or be served. I said no. I fought. I screamed. And they didn't restrain me. They didn't need to. They sedated me first. Just enough to keep me aware. Just enough to make me understand what was happening. I don't know how long it's been since then. They let me write sometimes. Said it helps the flavor. Keeps the soul vibrant, Vern once said. I don't know if anyone will ever read this. I don't know if I'm still fully me. There are days I can't remember my name. Days I look at the mirror and see nothing behind the eyes. But I remember her smile. I remember the way it looked. Empty and bright all at once. And sometimes, late at night, I feel them watching behind the walls. Not feeding, not yet, just waiting. Because I still have something left to give. And they are always hungry